In this video, we are going to see 10 different charts in Excel and how can we use each one of those charts in a practical way, and what are the differences between those charts. Why should I use a combo chart in Excel and not use a stacked column chart? Or why should I use a histogram chart instead of using a scatter plot chart? Why should I use a pie chart over a bar chart, and so forth? So step by step from scratch, let's see all those 10 different charts in Excel. Let's go. Let's get started with the line chart in Excel. And briefly, the line chart can help us visualize the data over time, over date. So if you have weeks, days, months, years, and so forth, you can use the line chart to help you. And why should I use a line chart in Excel over other charts? We're also gonna see here why. So first of all, I have a sales report with information such as weeks, total quantity, total sold, and also the margin. Let's say I want to know what is the total sold per week. So basically, I can use a chart to help me better visualize the data set that I have. Because of course, if I try to only use the data set itself, there is too much going on here with this data. So I can't even know what is happening throughout those dates, right? So using a chart is a much better way to visualize and analyze the data. Let me select the weeks, everything that I have, okay? And because I need to select right now the total, and both of those columns are separate from each other, weeks, and then I have a column, and then the one that I need, I'm gonna press and hold down the Control key, because that way I can select both of those columns at once. Okay, here we go. Now let's go here to insert, and we can find that Excel has many different charts. The one that I want to use is right here, line. Let me click here. Okay, so this is the line chart. So we're done. This is how we can create a line chart in Excel, and I can easily see the evolution of the data and also make here maybe a forecast. I can see that everything here is growing. So it starts in roughly $3,000, and now I'm basically at $3,500. So, okay, the analysis is done. I can see here the evolution of the data through this period of time. But let's now compare. What is the difference between the line chart and other charts? And why should I use a line chart when I have dates or time in Excel over another chart? So let me again select the weeks and the total. Okay, insert. Let's compare with the column chart. That is basically one of the most common charts in Excel. As we can see here, side by side, the column chart in Excel, okay, it works. However, it's not that great. It's not that easy to see the data, because as we can see, the columns are too thin, and I can't even see properly the columns, the width. So it's much difficult to see the data throughout the column chart comparing to the line one. So this is also a good tip here in Excel when the subject is charts. If you have some difficulty to memorize what is the best chart to use in any kind of situation, you can try to use the line one, try to use the column one, and see what fits best for the situation. In this case right here, as we can see, because we have dates, because we have times, we can use a line chart. It's much easier to see and analyze the data. So this is basically how we can use a line chart in Excel. And something very interesting is, if you click in the chart, as we can see, the data that the line chart is using is being highlighted here for me. And if you want to change now, instead of seeing the total, you want to see the total quantity, you can click in this bluish range right here, click, hold, and drag to the left like this. Now you can see the quantity. If you click, hold, and drag to the right like this, you're gonna be able to see the margin and so forth. So it's very easy to change what is the column or what is the data that you need to use in the chart in Excel. Now let's move on to the second chart. That is the area chart. And very briefly, basically the area chart and the line chart are the same charts. However, the area has an area underneath the line. So this is the difference briefly, okay? If we go here to the example that I have, rainfall total per month per region. So all the regions, south, north, west, and east, and the total rainfall in millimeters in January, February, March, until December. So if I want to compare all this data, of course, again, what I have in the first column, I have time, I have date, months, January, February, and so forth. So can I use right here a line chart? Yes, I can. However, because there is many different categories, such as south, north, west, east, or different data that I want to compare against each other, it's not ideal to use a line chart. We're going to see it right here. Let me select everything, and then I can go to, or actually, let me select just the first and the second column. Insert, and then line chart. Okay, perfect. I can analyze the data. However, if I have more categories to see, north, west, and east, it's not going to be an easy task to compare everything against each other. So let's say with the chart selected, I can click in the bottom right corner of this range, click, hold, and drag to the right, because that way I can increase the range. Okay, now I have all the 4 different categories. And okay, I can still see each one of the lines, and I know that each one of the lines, because they have a different color, they represent a different category, south, north, west, and east. However, let's activate here the legends. So select the chart, chart design, here to the left, add chart element, and then we can go to legend, to the right. Okay, I think it's okay. All right here. Now look here, the blue one is the south, the orange one is the north, and so forth, but it's not that easy to see the data throughout the lines. Now let's compare against the area chart and see the difference. Let me select here everything that I have, and then go to insert, and then area chart. The area chart is within the same option here, line, okay? But we need to go just down. Okay, this is the area chart. And if we compare one against each other, we can see that we have, of course, almost the same visualization, however, with an area underneath when we have the area chart. Let me click here in this header, the title, and get rid of. Okay, just to make it look more close to the line chart. And okay, now with the area chart, it's much easier to see the data. And of course, there is some data right here, such as west, that I cannot even see because maybe the values are underneath this yellowish one. So what I can do here is right click in the chart, and then I can go here to select data. And with this new window, I can change the layers of the chart. South is the first one, but if I move it down, as we can see, it's the blue one. Now it's overlapping anything else. So let me move up again. The north maybe can be, yeah, the second option. West maybe can be the first. Yeah, let me click OK, and we're done. So this is the area chart comparing to the line one. Both are showing the same information. However, I think in this case, the area one is better to show many different categories. And remember, if you have just 1 or 2 different categories, let's say south or south and north, I think the line chart is okay to show the data through a period of time. However, if you have more than 2, you have 3, 4, and so forth, different categories, I don't think the line chart is a good idea anymore. So this is why we have the area chart. Now it's time to move on to the third chart, that is the column chart. The column chart is one of the most common charts that we have in Excel, and it can fit in many different situations. However, briefly, it can help us to compare to see the performance of many different categories. So let's say, as the categories, I have the items, apple, avocado, banana, and so forth. And if I want to see what is the total sold, or compare the quantity sold for each one of those items, or the total sold, and so forth, I can use a column chart to help me. And why should I use a column chart over an area or a line chart? Because we're going to see it right here. Let me select the item and the quantity. I could also select the item, press and hold down the Ctrl like we did before to select different columns that are apart from each other, such as item name and total sold. However, let me stick with the items and the quantity. Now I can go to insert and then column chart. Okay, this is how we can create a column chart in Excel. Very simple to create and very easy. And that's it. Now I can see each one of the categories being represented by each one of the columns, apple, avocado, banana, and so forth. And also the height of each one of those columns represents the value. So I can see that banana is the item that sold the most, 100 units. And I can also see that grape is the item that sold the least, maybe 10 units only. Okay, but why should I use a column chart in Excel over another one? Let's try to use here a line chart with those items, with those categories. Insert, and then line chart. We can also represent the same data, however, in a different way. But I don't think the line chart is better in this example right here than the column chart, because the line chart, as we did learn, maybe looks like a evolution of something. As we can see, it looks like those categories right here is a time, is a period, is a date. And then we have here the evolution of the same thing, basically. We are seeing the values growing or the values decreasing and so forth. And because we are comparing different categories, item 1, item, the second item, the third item, the fourth item, and so on, it's not a good idea to use a line chart. And the area chart, we can apply the same principle, okay? So a column chart in Excel is the most common chart. If you have many different categories, different items, different things, and you want to compare those things against each other, the column chart is a good way to go. And let's go back to the previous example and see if the column chart right here could be a good option to use. So let me select everything, and then we can go back and see what is going to happen if instead of using 4 different categories, south, north, west, and east, I use one region. What is going to happen? So let's go to insert and then column chart. Okay, here we have. If I increase the size, now it's easy to see. And okay, maybe the column chart can fit, not that bad right here. However, if we compare the column chart with the line or with the area, we can see that those previous 2 are much better, right? So this is why it's not a good idea to always use a column chart in Excel. However, if you have, as I said, difficult to memorize what is the chart that is best for each one of the situations, the column chart is a good way to go. Or let me undo the action, and with this chart right here, let me decrease the quantity of the categories. So let's stick with the months and just one single region. Okay, now it's much better, right, to use the column chart. And in this case right here, because we only have one single category, maybe we could use right here the column chart, the line chart, or the area chart. However, because we have many different categories, the area chart is maybe the best way to go. Now let's move on to the 4th chart in Excel, that is the bar chart. The bar chart and the column chart can look kind of similar. However, the bar chart is going to be displayed in a horizontal position, as we can see right here, and a column chart, the bars of the column are going to be displayed into a vertical position. However, the difference stops in the visuals, because the bar chart can be used when the labels that you have are too long or you have too many different categories, as I have right here. So I have 2 different lists. The first one, most played games, and the second list, most purchased products. Let's start with the first list. I have all those games titles right here, and how many hours was played by someone. And I want to display this data into a chart. And as we can clearly see, there is no time right here, or I mean, there is no date, right? Of course, there is the total hours, but I'm talking about a different time. I'm talking about dates. There's no date right here, so we can see that it's not a good idea to use lines or area chart, but we can use column, maybe, and for sure we can use bar. So let's say why column chart maybe is not a good idea. Let's select everything, and then we can go to insert and column chart. Okay, this is the column chart. Now let's do the same process again, select everything, but this time using that column, the bar chart, sorry, bar chart, this one right here. Okay, let me put the bar chart here, and I want to increase the height of this chart, clicking in this little circle right here. Click, hold, and drag down. Click, hold, and drag down like this. With the bar chart, we can see clearly all the categories. With the column chart, we also can't see all the categories. However, the displacement of those categories is not that great, because as I said, the labels are too long, and I also have too many categories. So I don't think it's a good idea to use a column chart in Excel in this situation right here. So if you have many different categories, and also the labels are too large, such this one right here, the bar chart is a better idea. And another thing that you can do with the bar chart is organize in a way that you can see first the largest value to the smallest one, or vice versa, from the smallest one to the largest one. So let's organize this chart right here better. Let me go here to the data set, select everything, and then I can press the shortcut key in Excel, Ctrl-Shift-L, to input here the filters. If I click in this little circle right here, I can sort from the smallest to the largest, or vice versa. Let's see what's going to happen. And as we sorted the date into the data set, the date into the bar chart was also sorted for us. And I can see now the smallest value at the top and the largest one at the bottom. Now it's much more organized, and I can also change. Let me use the first option right here from A to Z. Okay, now it's better. It's like a top 10 chart or top 15, top 20. So the bar chart is a really good way to display large labels and with many different categories, because as we can notice, I can see everything, despite if the name of the game or the name of the category is too large or too small. We can see everything right here. And we can also see by the size or the width, the value that those bars represents. Now let's move on to a second example using again a bar chart, but this time I have a sales report with products, quantity sold, unit price, and total price. Again, I have many different categories and with some large labels. And if I select all the categories and let's say the values that I want to see, maybe the total price, okay, I can go again to insert and select the bar chart, because that way I'm gonna be able to see all the categories organized properly for me throughout the bar chart. Let's do the same process. I can apply here some filters, selecting everything, Ctrl-Shift-L, and I can click here in the total price, because this is the value that I'm using, so I can stick with the total price as my criteria, and I can organize this column like this. Now we can see the product that sold the most and the product that sold the least at the bottom. Okay, this is how we can use the bar chart in Excel. If we move on, we can learn how to compare proportions of a whole throughout the pie chart in Excel. And the whole, in this case, are the categories that I have. And the proportions are using, let's say, how many times each one of the sports appears in the list. Or I'm going to show different examples too. Let's say you want to compare what are the items that you sold the most. You want to see the proportions between those items. So this is the whole, all those items. And the proportions are the value for each one of the items. In this case, I have a list of the favorite sports among students. I have all the students' names and their favorite sports. So football, basketball, and so forth. And here to the right, I basically summarize the data with a column to the sports and another one to count how many times each one of those sports appears in the list. So if I select everything and go to insert, I can use maybe the line chart. I don't think so, because we do not have here time. We do not have date to use with the line or with the area chart. But could I use maybe the bar chart? Of course. But could I use the column chart? Of course. Could I use the pie chart? For sure, the pie chart can help us. And could I use the donut chart? Yeah, basically the difference between the pie and the donut is just the hollow in the middle, right? So let's stick with the pie. Okay, so this is the chart that I want to use. Just to make this chart looks better, I can go here to chart design and choose a different style. Maybe I can stick with the style 8, because now we have the percentages. And as we can notice, football is the most liked sport, or is the favorite sport among all the students, 34%. The second one is basketball with 25% and so forth. And it's noticeable that with the pie chart in Excel, we can compare each one of the categories against each other, because the larger the slice, the larger the value, and vice versa. So we can see what is the largest slice, what is the smallest one, and we can compare the data against each other. We can compare the categories. And the whole, as I was saying before, is the total pie that we have. So this is the whole, and we can divide into slices, into categories. And I also said in the beginning of this chart right here that it's not maybe a good idea to use many different categories, because let's say if I have a new category right here, so category A or 1, category 2, category 3, and category 4, and category 5. Let me put some random values right here. 20, 30, 10, 15, 5. If I click in the chart and bring down this range right here, we can notice that now it's not that easy to see the data anymore, because we have too many slices, and one slices is kind overlapping another one, and so forth. And remember that maybe I have here only 10 different categories. Imagine if I have 20 or 30 different categories. it's going to be much difficult to see all those slices. So this is something that you need to be mindful about the pie chart. Maybe you should use only 6, 7 different categories to properly be able to see all those categories as the slices. Let me get rid of the other categories, and yeah, that's it. Now let's try one more chart right here. Let me select everything again, insert, and I want to see a column chart or a bar chart. The bar chart is actually also a good chart to use right here, even more if we select the table and then sort from the largest one to the smallest one to have here actually a top 10 or a top 5 throughout those sports. But again, even though the bar chart is also a good idea to use in this situation right here, we cannot compare the proportions. Of course, we can see, let's say, the proportion about the width of the football bar with the golf bar and so forth. However, using a pie chart is much easier to compare the proportions because everything, all the slices are within the same circle. So it's much easier to compare the proportions between those categories. But anyway, you can use many different charts if you have just a simple data set, some categories and some values for each one of those categories. Now, a chart that is not that common to use in Excel is the scatter plot. However, it's very important to compare different categories to see if there is or not a relationship between two variables. Here I have a correlation between ice cream sales and the temperature. I don't know if when the temperature is higher, the sales are going to follow the temperature or vice versa. So this is what I'm trying to figure out right here. So let me select both of the columns that I want to use. And remember, because I have date right here, if I just want to verify or to analyze the sales throughout those dates, I could also use here a line chart or an area chart. However, I don't want to do this specific analysis right here. What I want to do is I want to compare if there is or not a relationship between the sales and the temperature that are two different variables. Let me select all those columns. Okay. And now we can go to insert. And here I'm going to have as this little icon right here, the scatter plot chart. Let me click on this chart and we can notice that, yeah, indeed, there is a strong correlation between the temperature and the sales. Each one of those dots that we have represents a sales point with a temperature. So it's a coordinate using those two variables. If we take a look right here, we can see that this first point right here is about $8,000 when the temperature is 10 degrees Celsius. However, when, let's say, if I increase the sales, let's take here $5,000, it's because also the temperature increases, as we can see right here. So the higher the temperature, the higher the sales, and vice versa. The lower the temperature, the lower the sales. But there is a changing point right here. That is this point. When the temperature is higher than 35 degrees Celsius, we can see that there is a decrease in the sales. And maybe this happened because, let's say, it's too hot and people don't want to go outside to buy anything. So this is why this is the changing point. But anyway, there is a strong correlation here between those two variables. Histogram, this is the next chart that we are going to see. And it's a really good chart to see the frequency of occurrence for the values that we have in the data set. So let's take a look here in this practical example. Total sold by salesperson. I have the salesperson name and the months from January through April, and then again and again and so forth. And then the sales for each one of the salesperson throughout each one of those months. So let's say I want to know what is the sales value that occurs the most. Maybe it's between $10,000 and $25,000. I don't know. Let's say, but this is the frequency that occurs the most. There is 10 sales in between this range. And then the next frequency that occurs the most is 7 times a value between, let's say, $5,000 up to $10,000. So we can see the frequency through the frequency distribution throughout the data set. Let me select both of those columns right here. Don't need to select the salesperson name because it doesn't matter who sold what. The thing that is important is I want to see the frequency distribution for the sales throughout the months. Or I can actually use only the sales. Take a look here. Select the sales. This is the only data that is important for me. and I want to see, as I said before, the distribution of those values. And then insert, and then I can select the histogram, the chart in the middle, select the first option, and that's it. Now let me increase the width of this chart to properly see all those values. And another thing that we can do here to make it easier to see, instead of trying to figure out what is the value of each one of those columns through the values to the left, I can go to chart design and then add chart element, data labels, and maybe outside and. Okay, now I can see the values. Let's say the frequency or the range that occurs the most is this one right here, 21 times. That is a range between $11,000 up to $18,000. The second range that occurs the most is this range right here, from $5,000 up to $11,000 and so forth. So if you have a data set and you want to see what is the distribution frequency for all the values that you have, you can use a histogram chart. And you can also change, instead of separate the histogram using 1, 2, 3, 4 different ranges, you can change the ranges. Let me double click on those values here at the bottom. 1, 2. You can open this right panel right here, and you can go to the last option, axis option, and you can go to number of bins. And right here we have 4 as before. However, I want to change to 2. Let's say enter. Now we're gonna have only 2 different categories, 2 different ranges. And if I use, let's say 6, enter, I'm gonna have more different ranges. And that way I'm gonna be able to see the frequency of all those different ranges. You can also customize using different methods, using bin width automatically like it was before, by category and so forth. But let me close this panel right here, increase a little bit more the width. And yeah, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different categories. And I can see that the category that occurs the most is this one right here. 15 times for the values between the range $5,000 up to $9,000 and so forth. Histogram chart in Excel to display the frequency distribution of a dataset. Clustered column chart is basically when you need to create multiple column charts. However, you don't want to create multiple column charts. You can create all those charts within one single chart. Or when you have different categories with different categories. So let's say sales report per region per item. I have a value that corresponds to a category such as blueberry and to another category that is north, that is the region. So item is my first category and north is the second one. Let's stick with only the first 2 columns. Apple and the total sold for this item for all the regions that I have. If I go to insert and then select a column chart in Excel, here we have, and that's it, we're done. South, north, east, and west. Simple as that. Now let's say I have more data to select. Banana, blueberry, and I need to create all those charts for all those items. I can, instead of using a normal column chart, I can basically select everything and go to insert, click here, and then use a clustered column chart. Actually, it's the same chart. However, we can expand this range. And the result is going to be something like this, where we can see both of the categories that we have. The one to the left, the region, and the one here above, that is the items. And if you also want to change, instead of display the items as the categories, you can display the regions. So let me click in the chart before I explain what is going on with the chart. Let's go to chart design, and within this option I can switch row to column, as we can see right here. But let's stick with the first option. And then we have the first group that is being separated from the other one, that is being separated from the other one, and so forth. The first group represents the first category, apple. The second one, the second category, banana, and so forth. So those are the items. And the colors represents the regions, south, north, east, and west. The way I can see items per region. But if I click in the chart, and as we did before, chart design, switch row to column, we can see basically the opposite. Now the region per item. Now each one of those groups are being represented by a region, and each one of the colors are being represented by an item. Basically have the same thing, but organized in a different way. However, using a clustered chart in Excel is an excellent way to display many different informations like we have right here. When not only you have one single category or many different categories throughout a column or throughout a row. However, you have both many different categories throughout each one of the rows and also each one of the columns. So a cluster chart is a really good way to go. Now, the second to last chart that we're going to see is the stacked column. With the stacked column chart, we can see the individual contributions for each one of the categories of a whole and also the total. Because let's say I have all the items within this row right here and another category, the weeks, Monday, Tuesday, in the first column. And I want to know what is the total sold for the item 1, for the item 2, and so forth. However, I also want to see the individual contributions, $50, $31, $16, $41, and so forth. If I select this entire data set, don't need to select the shelf location, and then I go to insert and use just a normal column chart, of course, we can see the data throughout this chart. However, look the difference between a simple column chart to the stacked one. Let me select everything again, insert. Now I want to use the second option within the column chart, the stacked column. Now we can see much more. Let me bring this chart down like this, bring to the right. Okay. Despite the fact that both are a column chart, the stacked column, we can see the total for each one of the categories, because basically we are adding up the individual values and put all those categories on the top of another. Let me bring this chart to the right. It's easier to see. So this is the stacked column chart. We can see the item 1, the item 2. Those are the categories. They are being separated from each other. And the colors represents the weeks, the dates, or the second category that we have, the second criteria. The first one is this one right here. This is the first criteria. The second one are the colors. And each one of the colors represents a different value. If we take, for example, the item 2, we can see that Monday has a smaller value than Tuesday, for example, because the height is different. And if we go here to the table, item 2, here, item 2, Monday is equal to 12, and Tuesday is equal to 38. Yes, the difference is very large between those two values. And this is the thing that we can see right here throughout this specific point of the chart. Another thing that we can compare is, let's say, take maybe the item 1. The item 1, the largest value is the first one, Monday. And if we go to the data set, we can see that it's true. Item 1, the largest value is 50, and it's on Monday. So throughout the stacked column chart in Excel, we can see the total for each one of the categories, the first category, and we also can add another category that is the individual columns within the columns that we have. So small columns, small categories that make up a larger category. So this is how the stacked column chart in Excel works. Very different than this one right here, because basically, if we take here the first category, item 1, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different categories within the main category. If we compare it to the normal column chart, all those 7 different categories are being separated from each other throughout those colors. However, in the stacked, those values, those columns are being put on the top of another to create the stacked column. Finally, the last chart, the combo chart or the combined chart in Excel. As the name suggests, the combo chart can combine multiple charts into only one chart. So let's take an example here, a sales report, and let's say I want to see the total quantity sold per week. And as we did learn before, I can use right here a line chart or a area chart. So let me go here to insert, and I want to stick with a line chart. Okay, like this. But let's say I want to also see a different information. I also want to see the total sold. I want to see the quantity and the total. How can I do it? Let me click in this chart and move the range to the right, like this. Now I have 2 different charts within one single chart. I have the quantity and the total throughout the weeks, throughout a date. But I can't even see properly both of those informations. And this is very common to happen into a combo chart. So what you can do to make this chart better to visualize is right click and then go to change chart type and combo. Now you need to create a secondary axis to either of those charts that you have. So let's stick with the second one. Okay. Now, as the first chart, the blue one, maybe I can use let's say, a column chart as we have right here, or it's better to use a line chart because I have the evolution of the values throughout the week. So line, and as the second one, I can continue to use a line, or maybe I can use column or area chart or so forth. But let me stick with both of lines charts, okay? And yeah, here we have. Now we can compare the quantity sold with the total sold. And we can see many different interesting things right here. The first one is when we have a large value of sales, it's because we also have a large value of quantity sold. And the same thing applies in the opposite way. If we have a small quantity sold, we also gonna have a small total sold. Now let's compare different things with this combo chart, or let's create another one. Let me select the margin, and I want to see if there is a correlation between the margin and the total, and that way I can use a combo chart. Let me select both of those columns, and then I can go to insert, and then I can stick with column, okay? I know that I cannot properly see all the data, but if I right click right here and then go to change chart type, combo, I can activate here a secondary axis, and now I can properly see the data. Let me click OK. Let me increase the width of this chart right here. The column chart represents the total sold, the sales, and the orange line represents the margin. And whenever the sales go down, we can see that the margin grows, and also the vice versa is true. So if the sales go up, like we have right here, it's because the margin went down. So basically, this is how we can use a combo chart in Excel when we have different informations to compare. And we cannot only use, let's say, one single column chart or one single line. We need to combine a column chart with a line, and we need to create a two axes, one to the left and a secondary to the right, to be able to compare both of those informations and so forth. So this is how we can use all those 10 different charts in Excel in a practical way, and I hope this video can help you out. And if you have any questions or any suggestions to the next videos, let me know, comment down below, and I see you tomorrow, because every day has a new video.